All right, today we're going to go on a quest, you and me. We're on the hunt for the perfect way to learn English. And let me tell you, it's a journey that's been full of some pretty big mistakes, some really brilliant breakthroughs, and an answer at the end that honestly might surprise you. So let's just dive right in.
So let me ask you something. Does this sound familiar? You've spent hours memorizing verb conjugations. You know all the grammar rules. But then the moment comes to actually speak to someone and nothing. It's just crickets. It's such a common frustration, right? And that feeling right there is really at the heart of what we're talking about today.
Okay, so to really get a handle on where we are today with language learning, we've got to go back, way back to the beginning. Our first stop is an era that was pretty much defined by two things: super strict rules and just endless, mind-numbing repetition.
You know, when you look at the history of teaching English, it's really just a long story of trial and error. Seriously. Every new method that pops up is basically a direct reaction to the old one, trying to fix all the stuff that the last one got wrong. So, the first big method on the scene was called the grammar translation method. And I want you to picture your most classic old school language class. You're probably spending hours and hours just translating these ancient texts from like Latin or Greek and just drilling grammar rule after grammar rule. The whole idea was, hey, if you just master the rules, you've mastered the language. Simple as that. But, and this is a big but, there was a massive flaw in this thinking. This whole method treated English like it was some kind of dead artifact in a museum you were supposed to dissect, not a living, breathing tool for connecting with other people. So what happened? It created students who could read and write flawlessly, sure, but it completely failed to teach them how to actually speak. They were totally lost in a real conversation. It just didn't work for the real world. So the pendulum swings, right? The response to that failure was something called the audio-lingual method, and it took a completely different tack. It basically treated learning a language like you train for a sport. The whole idea was to build muscle memory for your mouth through endless, repetitive drills. You know the type. Listen, repeat. Listen, repeat. The goal was to make speaking a totally automatic habit, no thinking involved. But as you can probably guess, just repeating things over and over had its limits too. By the 1970s, a new group of thinkers started to argue that, hey, language is way more than just a set of habits. This led to a huge shift in thinking, a total paradigm shift, really, and the focus moved to one single thing: communication. And this right here really gets to the core of why those old methods just weren't cutting it. I mean, think about it. You can memorize every single rule in the book. You can repeat thousands of sentences without a mistake, but does that mean you can actually, order a coffee or have a real debate about something? No. The argument was that language is all about getting your meaning across, not just spitting out perfect sentences. So, this new way of thinking led straight to what's called the communicative approach, or CA for short. And honestly, it was revolutionary. All of a sudden, the main goal wasn't to be perfect. It was to be fluent. Getting your message across was way more important than getting every little grammar point right. Classrooms totally changed. They filled up with role-playing, group discussions, and all sorts of real-world tasks. And look, this was a massive step forward for fluency. Students were finally talking. But, of course, there's a but. This new approach created its own completely different problem. Let's call it the grammar dilemma. And here's the big twist in our story. While students got way more fluent, their accuracy often took a nosedive. In a classroom totally focused on communication, a teacher might overlook mistakes as long as they could understand what the student was trying to say. And the results? Well, a lot of learners ended up with these really persistent grammar mistakes that became super, super hard to unlearn later on.
So now we have this new challenge, right? On the one hand, you've got students who can actually talk and express themselves, which is fantastic. But on the other hand, they're making the same basic mistakes again and again. So the big question became, how do we get the best of both worlds? Is there a way to keep that awesome fluency while also building up some solid accuracy? And the answer to that question, well, that's pretty much where our quest ends. It's a modern, balanced approach that takes all the lessons we've learned from the past and puts them together. This really is the big aha moment in the world of language teaching. It's called focus on form. And no, this isn't about going back to those boring old grammar drills. Not at all. Instead, it's about cleverly weaving grammar instruction into the fun communicative stuff. So, for example, you might learn about the past tense and then immediately jump into a role play where you have to tell a friend all about what you did last weekend. See? You learn the rule, and then you instantly use it for something real and meaningful. Now, this balanced approach is a real game changer, especially for people whose native language is really different from English, like Japanese, for instance. See, for adult learners, just being exposed to the language isn't always going to cut it. But we adults have a superpower: logic. We can actually analyze and understand the underlying system of the language, and that's a huge advantage we should definitely be using.
Okay, so that's all the theory. But what does this actually look like in practice? I mean, how can you, a dedicated learner, actually use this balanced approach every single day? Let's break it down into a simple plan.
Okay, it's basically a 3-step process. Step 1 happens at home. You study one specific grammar rule in the morning, really focus, really understand it. Then, step 2, you go to school or work, a more structured place, and you consciously try to apply that exact rule in a focused task, like maybe discussing a business report. And finally, step 3, you take it out into the wild. You use that same rule in real, spontaneous conversations, when you're traveling, grabbing lunch with coworkers, whatever. It's this perfect little cycle of learn, apply, and then truly internalize.
And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? This is the core idea of a balanced approach. A strong foundation in grammar doesn't get in the way of communication. It powers it. It's the engine that makes your speaking and writing clearer, more efficient, and way more effective. Rules and fluency aren't enemies fighting each other. They're partners. They absolutely need each other to work.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? The quest for the one perfect method isn't about choosing one extreme or the other. It's not rules or fluency. It's about finding that smart, integrated balance between them. And now, that journey is yours. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. Right now, in your own learning, are you leaning too hard on the rules or maybe too much on just fluency? How can you start to bring a little more balance into your routine?